Good evening, everyone. My name is Venerable Wade Bhuripañño. I'm a monk ordained in the tradition of Ajahn Chah of Thailand, ordained at Wat Mapchan in Rayong Province, Thailand, in 2014. And this is a Dhamma talk from Empty Cloud Monastery, where I arrived about a week ago. And Bhante Sutaso has asked me to give a talk on the Pāramis. Begin with the traditional Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Putang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. The topic of Pārami, interesting in many respects, I think, and I find quite inspiring, actually. One interesting thing about the topic of Pārami is that it's quite central to Thai Buddhism. It's a topic that's raised quite frequently, in common parlance in Thai Buddhism. We don't find it in the Pali Suttas, interestingly. The term Pārami doesn't occur, I've read, and I've actually never seen it in the Suttas. But it does show up in the commentaries written down in Sri Lanka about 500 AD. And they occur in a story about the Bodhisattva's aspiration to attain to be a Samma Sambuddha. The Bodhisattva's name at the time was Sumedha, which means the wise one. And he was a very accomplished meditator who lived as a hermit. And he met the Dipankara Buddha, as I recall. That was the name of the Buddha in that era. And was so inspired that he formed the aspiration, as he told the Dipankara Buddha, I want to be just like you. He was so inspired by the Buddha. And the Dipankara Buddha responded with a prediction that, in fact, in the future, he would be a Samma Sambuddha. Going away from this historic meeting, the Bodhisattva was trying to consider, what is it that he has to do on this path to Buddhahood? What is the path to Buddhahood? What kind of qualities does he have to cultivate? And through his own insight, he was able to discern 10 qualities that are now considered in the Theravadan tradition to be the 10 Pārami. And Bhante Sudaso has very kindly prepared a list for me. Here we go. So I don't have to remember them off the top of my head. We have, I'll run through this list relatively quickly. It's the Dana Pārami, which means generosity. The Sila Pārami, which means virtue, morality, or proper conduct. The Nekama Pārami, which means renunciation. The Paññā Pārami, which is wisdom or discernment. The Virya Pārami, which is energy, diligence, or effort. The Khanti Pārami, which is patience or endurance. The Sacha Pārami, which is honesty. The Adhitthana Pārami, which is determination or resolution. The Metta Pārami, which is goodwill or loving kindness. And the Upekkha Pārami, which is equanimity. So through his own insight, the Bodhisattva discerned that these are the 10 qualities that he had to develop in order to become a Samma Sambuddha. And according to the story, he strove for 4 incalculable eons, developing these qualities to a state of perfection, so that he could, on his own, without a teacher to provide for him the Four Noble Truths, he could make a breakthrough to the Dhamma see these Four Noble Truths, and then teach others. And that's why we have the Buddhist religion now. He attained Buddha as the Gautama Buddha in our own history. The list, I find it quite inspiring, because it's to me, the list is about the human potential, and it's about hope, and it's about the promise that if you try, you can reach your heart's aspiration, which I found to be a constant message of the meditation masters in Thailand that I was very fortunate to live and practice with and learn from. They consistently told us that if we tried, if we put our hearts into our practice, that we could attain the goals that we wanted to achieve. I found that very inspiring, because life is quite uncertain, and the material aspects of life we can't really count on. Will we be rich or poor? Will we be able to have the kind of job that we want? Will we have the kind of relationships that we want? There's so many things in life are uncertain. But the meditation masters of Thailand say that if you make a sincere effort, then you can attain your spiritual goals. One said that the effort, as long as you keep persistently putting in the effort to attain your spiritual goals, the effort will draw you to your goals as though you were a cord. We're drawing you to your goals, attached to your goals. We're drawing you to it. My own teacher, Lumpur Anand, said that as long as you keep trying, you cannot fail. That you definitely will succeed. And I found that quite inspiring. And after living with some of the meditation masters, I developed some faith in this. And I feel that to some extent, personally, I have some faith in this also, because I'm surprised at the benefits I've seen in Dhamma practice in my own life. And I've looked back over the years in my own Dhamma practice and say, oh, actually, I have made some progress, and I feel quite good about it. And so I have hope that this is really true, this sort of sentiment. And so I'd like to try to pass that on to you as well this evening in discussion of the Pāramis. So the teaching of one of the teachings of the lineage of Ajahn Mun and Ajahn Chah is that within each of us we have a mind. What comes from the Pali is the chitta. And in the Thai force tradition, they say the chitta, the mind, is that in you which knows. Okay? It is puru, it is the one who knows. So as we interact with our daily experience, and we have awareness of what's happening, that awareness is coming from the chitta, that's our mind. And then the chitta also is the one that initiates mental states. It is emotions and other sorts of mental states in regard to our sense experience. And so sometimes the Thais will use the term mind for it, or sometimes they'll use the term heart because of the emotional aspect of it as well. And within the heart reside all of these different mental states, the different kinds of emotions we might experience, such as greed, for example, or loving kindness, or hatred, for example, or equanimity, a feeling of balance and peace in the mind. Also, the raw materials for other kinds of mental states, such as energy, is something that resides in the mind, and the quality of generosity, the desire to give, resides in the mind as well. And while the mind oftentimes initiates these mental states and these emotions on its own, we can influence the whole process. And so the meditation masters would recommend that we consciously try to cultivate and to frequently access and utilize, initiate the skillful mental states, and try to go beyond and to let go of and to not feed into unskillful mental states. So, for example, the list of 10 parami are very skillful sorts of mental formations, mental states that they would say we would be well advised to initiate frequently and to use. And in their using, they grow stronger. Every time, for example, we give, we develop our quality of generosity, the first parami. Similarly, with the other 9 parami, when we exert ourselves, we make an effort, then we develop our energy parami, for example. When we practice self-control with regard to, for example, regard to morality, then we're developing our quality of sila, the sila parami. And they say that when you develop your parami, they cannot be reduced. So while so many other things in life are transient, they're impermanent, they're inconstant, and they can be lost. And in fact, we have to be parted from everything external to us that we hold dear. The internal qualities that we have, such as patient endurance and honesty and determination, these 10 parami, are qualities that we can develop and we can keep, and we take them with us into our future lives. So I think it's a very hopeful message, and it's something we can kind of anchor our practice in, that this is something that we can count on. I say that with a bit of a chuckle, because there's so much in life that turns out to be uncertain in the end. But in my own practice as well, I've developed faith in this idea, because it seems to me like these various muscles that we have in the heart, if you will, these strengths, these qualities, really do seem to develop over time. And we see real progress. This seems not to fade. So in my humble experience, I can say that I have some faith in this personally. One way I've come to think about the various qualities that we can develop, and how we navigate through life, is that on the one hand, we depend on our intentional actions. As we say in Pali, we use the term kamma, which means intentional actions. In Sanskrit, they use the term karma, a term more commonly used in America in modern times. And the consequences of our karma are quite important to us. Beings live dependent upon, for example, generosity, so that we have the material supports that we need in life. In Thailand, they say that if you have food to eat, then you have the merit of having given something in the past. So that even just as something as simple we might take for granted as having food to eat is dependent upon having done good deeds in the past. If you're fortunate enough to be reborn as a human being, then it means that you must have kept good sila in the past. It means you must have kept your precepts, some good morality. You must not have violated the 5 basic precepts. In their breaking, if we break the precepts, we're very liable to fall into the lower realms, from which is so hard to come back up to the human realm. But the benefits of good karma and the disadvantages of bad karma are actually impermanent. When they arise, when our actions come to fruition, we experience them arising and then changing over time and passing away. And so these will have benefit for us, but the meditation masters would warn, as long as you're in samsara, you can try to build up good karma, and that'll be very good for you. In fact, it's necessary. But you'll have to experience that the benefits of your good karma will eventually pass away. A positive reflection is that when we're experiencing suffering, we can reflect that the negative consequences of our bad karma also must pass away. This can give us some solace in hard times, I think. But additionally, not all of our experience is dependent on karma, which I think is a point to keep in mind. That some of our experience in life is the consequences of actions that we can see in the present. We can see the cause and effect relationships in the present. Um, so, for example, if we go to work, we do a good job and we get paid for our work, we can see the cause and effect relationship there that's really necessary for our lives. Uh, if But another aspect is the unseen cause and effect relationships, as with karma, as I was just discussing. So we may see some of the cause and effect. For example, the Buddha pointed out in the suttas quite frequently with karma that you'll see some consequences now. For example, if you steal, you may have to go to jail. And he added, though, that there are additional consequences that would come in the future from stealing, and you wouldn't be able to see the cause and effect relationships. And this is a part of life that the meditation masters echo. They say, actually, this really is true. Um, but another aspect of our experience is that it's the cause and effect relationships are simply not discernible. There is some amount of kind of chaos in the realm of samsara. Samsara is very unstable, and there are a variety of different influences, and not everything comes from our karma. Additionally, living beings have the ability to initiate intentions spontaneously, and so we ourselves can have influence over local situations, and also people or other beings can have influences over our lives that has nothing to do with our own karma. But if we develop our parami, these skillful mental states, these kind of muscles that we have in the heart, these internal resources, then these can see us through difficult times. And in difficult times, we can continue to develop these parami. It can serve as the conditions for us attaining our aspiration, our spiritual aspirations in life. So, for example, if we've made insufficient acts of giving in the past, and we lack material requisites, but if we have the parami of patient endurance, then we can endure quite difficult physical situations. A lack of food or clothing or shelter or medicines in our life. That's just one example. Or if we have the upekkha parami, if we have sufficient upekkha parami to feel equanimous about our situation, this to my mind, can in many cases be similar to the parami of endurance. This also could be a support for us. And if we have some dana parami, the generosity parami, then we can begin giving even in difficult times. Even if we don't have a lot, we may be willing to make a sacrifice. And this would serve as good karma that could cause the arising of material benefits for us in the future. So thinking of some inspiring stories about the parami of Sisiam. In the ordained at Wat Mapchan in Rayong province in Thailand, and in the Opposita Hall, where we listened to the recitation of the monks' rules every 2 weeks, and where the community would gather for the evening worship service every night. On the altar, we had quite a large Buddha image statue, a beautiful statue of the Buddha, and 4 life-size statues of other saints in the Thai Buddhist religion. We had Somdet Do, perhaps one of the most famous and most highly respected monks in Thailand, Lumpu Tuat. He's Reverend Grandfather. Lumpu means Reverend Grandfather. Tuat, another highly renowned saint in the history of Thai Buddhism. We had a statue of Lumpu Mun, Reverend Grandfather Mun, the root teacher of this lineage, and a life-size statue of Ajahn Chah. And so these four statues lined up side by side, life-size statues, um, form sort of an interesting group, because the two that I mentioned first, Somdet Do and Lumpu Tuat, were actually bodhisattvas. And Lumpu Man and Lumpu Cha, according to the faith of their followers, were enlightened beings, arahants. And when I was new to Wat Mapjan, I found this interesting. Thank you, because Theravadan Buddhism is typically associated with the path to arahantship, whereas bodhisattvas are typically considered, I think in America and the West, to be associated with Mahayana Buddhism. And Thailand is a Theravadan country. But I found that being in Thailand, that actually is quite a great deal of respect and worship for many bodhisattvas, well known in the Mahayana tradition. Close to the Uposatha Hall, we had a chapel that my teacher had built at the request of lay supporters for the great bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara as well. A beautiful little chapel to practice in, very inspiring. And it's quite common in the country of Thailand to see statues, even quite huge statues of the bodhisattva Guanyin, who's widely worshipped in Thailand. Remember sitting on a train going from Korat towards the center of Buddhism, geographically, the center of Thailand, and in some ways perhaps the center of Buddhism also, and going down to Bangkok and riding on the rails, seeing off to either side huge statues of the Buddha and huge statues of Guanyin, Guanyin as she's called in Thailand. And the bodhisattvas, I remember distinctly one huge statue of Lumpu Tuat off to the side as well. And so simply riding on the train from Korat for about 3 or 4 hours down to Bangkok, it felt like a pilgrimage, seeing all these beautiful statues along the way. And the idea of the bodhisattva is that, or as I said in Pali, the bodhisattva, is that they are beings intent on enlightenment. That is the enlightenment of becoming a Sama Sambuddha, a rightly self-awakened Buddha, like the Gautama Buddha, the Buddha of our history. And so in this process, they're going to develop, working on developing these parami to their utmost extent. And some even delaying their attainment of Sama Sambuddha in order to continue developing this parami and helping living beings here in the samsara. And the idea of the arahant is to work out their salvation and attain enlightenment in the present, in this Buddhist dispensation. According to the meditation masters of Thailand, once the enlightened being attains enlightenment, it goes to nibbana at death, the citta, that is the heart, the mind that I was referring to earlier, passes into nibbana and can still come back into samsara to help beings that it has a karmic connection with, using actually the parami that they've developed on their own path, and to do so. This was something that I'd never heard of before going to Thailand, and I'd say I have something I have to take on faith, but I thought it would be quite an inspiring idea that there are enlightened beings like the Buddha and perhaps Ajahn Mun and Ajahn Chah still working for the benefit of their friends here in samsara, and that the development of this parami, the spiritual virtues that they developed, will have a long-lasting effect, not only for themselves, but for others. And the inspiring ideal of the bodhisattvas who are developing, working very hard at developing these parami for the benefit of other beings. My own teacher said that if you consider the great bodhisattvas Kuan Yin or Avalokiteshvara and so many others, he said they're all they want, all they really want in life is to help others. All they really want is to give. I thought it was quite an inspiring aspiration. If we could develop ourselves to this extent that we have such a strong desire that our goal in life is to give to others. This is must be quite a rewarding spiritual place to be in. I think that the pleasures associated with generosity are that if you can develop generosity and you practice generosity with faith, that you experience pleasure in doing so that is superior to the pleasures you might experience from, for example, sensual pleasures. For example, the pleasures you might find in food or in fun or in beautiful sights and sounds. Something that I've experienced, I think, in my own life to some extent. That when we practice generosity, it feels very good. We get a delicious feeling inside, a very pleasant feeling in the heart, and then later on, when we reflect on it, it causes an uprising of good feelings again. A friend of mine once told a story to me. He said that he went on a cruise on the Danube River, and he said the Danube River in Germany. And he said they treated you just like you were the Kaiser. He said that they fed you the exquisite meals, and they were feasts actually, and there were beautiful sights all along the river as they floated down it, and they were able to get off and go into various little towns and villages off to the side of the Danube River. And he said the trip was perfect in every way. It was the perfect kind of cruise. And then when he got back to the United States, he found a fundraising appeal in his mailbox to build. The appeal was asking him to help build a home for villagers in a Middle Eastern country where they were quite poor and they didn't even have adequate housing. And so he wrote a check to build a new house for a family in this country, in this foreign country, and he noticed actually that the check that he was writing for this gift was actually about the same as the price of that cruise on the Danube River. But he said that it gave him a very good feeling to write this check for this gift, and that later when he reflected on it, as he did a number of times, in noting that he gave the same amount of money, it was equal to the amount of money he spent on that cruise, that the pleasure he experienced from that act of giving was much greater than anything he experienced remembering the cruise was like. I think in general, these kinds of spiritual pleasures that we can experience along the path, I find to be more rewarding than the pleasures we might find in worldly pursuits. I was very fortunate in lay life myself, that I had a pretty good job, and I made quite a good amount of money, and I had quite had some disposable income. I had some money that I could have fun with. I was single, and I was making more money than the average wage in the area that I was living in. I lived in Silicon Valley, and it was quite a beautiful area, and I was quite fortunate. A few years before ordaining as a monk, or entering the monastery, I was in love. I fell in love twice, back to back, with wonderful women, and we had a lot of good times together. I mean, we went to various places in California. Went to let's see if I remember the names of the cities. Went to, for example, on vacation to Monterey. Went on vacation down to Santa Barbara. Went to Hawaii. Went snorkeling and ziplining and all these kinds of things. We had a great time. But I found that the coming into the monastery, as I had long had the aspiration to do, and undertaking precepts, which quite restricted me from many of these activities, and practicing meditation. That is my personal feeling that the pleasures associated with these was actually much greater than what I experienced in lay life, even though I had quite a good time in lay life. So I'd like to offer that for some inspiration, that if you put effort into your practice, hopefully you'll find the same, as is the promise of the Buddha's teachings. So, thinking about the development of Pāramis, and I'm here at Empty Cloud Monastery, and the name Empty Cloud is quite an auspicious name in modern times in Buddhism, because it's also the name of a great Buddhist master from China. I asked Bhante Sudaso shortly before coming, I said, did you choose the name Empty Cloud in honor of the saint Empty Cloud of China? And he says, actually, no, but it's just quite a good association to have anyway. For those of you who aren't familiar with Empty Cloud, his Chinese name Su Yun, which he gave to himself after he felt that he had attained his goal of attaining enlightenment. Empty cloud, meaning in Chinese, cloud is a symbol of a monk traditionally, and so he was the empty monk. His heart was clear because he had extirpated, he'd thrown out all of the defilements of mind, and so his heart was clear and empty of these defiling forces. And he was he's a gigantic character in modern Buddhism, because he revitalized Chinese Buddhism. It seems it's so much Pāramis, so much spiritual virtue, that he was quite an inspiring person. He early in his career as a monk, he undertook a 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage through. I think it may actually probably amounted to most of China. It was quite an epic 3 steps, 1 bow pilgrimage. And in doing so, he had to endure a great deal of difficulties. At one point, he was caught in a blizzard, and he took refuge in an abandoned building. As I recall, it didn't have doors or windows. It had windows, but with no glass, and a doorway, but no door, as I recall. And as he told the story, the snow was falling so heavily it swirled into the abandoned building he was sitting in, where he tried to take refuge, and the snow was literally piling up around him, and he just had to endure this difficulty. Fortunately, he survived this, and he continued on his way through many difficulties, until at one point he had both amoebic dysentery and malaria simultaneously. So he reported to his disciples he had amoebic dysentery and malaria, which malaria entails quite painful high fevers. I'm fortunate that I've never had it myself, but I once took care of a monk who had it, an American monk in Burma. You see, it was quite difficult, very high fevers associated with it. And amoebic dysentery causes diarrhea. It causes you to pass your food very quickly, and so you get very little nutrition from it. It depletes your system very quickly. And yet Su Yun was so intent on completing his pilgrimage that he pressed on, he said, for another 7 days, even with these 2 very difficult illnesses, until on the 7th day he made his way through a town, and outside of the town he found a hilltop, or a rise, I think you'd probably say, and at night, and he simply lay down, and he noted to his disciples he'd stooled 12 times that day. And he was completely depleted of energy. He lay on his back, and he looked up at the sky, and he thought, even though he hadn't completed his pilgrimage, surely this was the end. And he said to himself, told his disciples, and his heart was so peaceful, and he had no regrets, because he was able to try to put forth effort to reach his destination, to reach his goal, and he felt so good about that. But his story doesn't end there. This is just actually still just the beginning of the story for Su Yun, because then kind of a miracle happened as someone came and made medicine for him and gave him medicine. It turns out it was a beggar that he'd met several days before on his pilgrimage, and nursed him back to health. And Su Yun was able to actually continue on his pilgrimage, doing 3 steps, 1 bow. And he came to a monastery where he was going to spend a night along the way, and he was discussing this really wonderful occurrence with the abbot of the monastery, and who responded, that beggar was actually a transformation body of the bodhisattva. Suddenly I'm forgetting the bodhisattva's name after this. The bodhisattva associated with the mountain that Su Yun was on pilgrimage trying to reach. That this bodhisattva had made a commitment, made a determination that he would help pilgrims who were trying to reach his mountain, where he resided. And this is somewhat of a recurring story in Buddhism that we find in the story of Su Yun as well. That if we continue to try, then the resources will arise. That the good karma associated with the good effort, the skillful effort, will bring to us the supports that we need for our spiritual journey. And that there will be people who will come and support us. In some cases, even the great bodhisattvas themselves, who will come into our lives and assist us personally. My various meditation masters in Thailand have told stories like this about being helped along the path to enlightenment by bodhisattvas as well. So it's something that I have to take on faith to some extent, but I find quite inspiring, and I think I've seen to some extent on my own spiritual path over the last 10 years living in the monasteries. I personally suffered from quite painful physical condition over the last for a number of years, but it's been much more difficult over the last 6 or 7 years. Remember this is some of this. I hope this isn't too heavy talking about all these physical problems, but I'll try to move on to another sort of topic afterward. So, experiencing migraine headaches and other physical symptoms for years was quite difficult to bear up under. A few weeks ago, I actually fainted twice in my dwelling at a forest monastery in quick succession. Fainted, got up, and fainted again, and got up, and in enduring difficulties like this in my practices in the monkhood, being ill, and sometimes feeling like, if I return to lay life, I might have more physical supports, and I might have more control over my circumstances so that I can take care of my health better. But consistently finding that if I endure, if I try to use the skillful qualities and the practices that the meditation masters and the Buddha recommended, that things keep working out, which is a message of the teachers. And I find that the people arise and help out along the way. And I've seen this for other meditators as well. And so in some cases, people going to lengths that you never expect people to go to in order to try to help. My own teacher, for example, in another way, is another example of this. He's going to his monastery in Thailand. Many Westerners going there, so he always has a group of about 10 or 11 or 12 of us, and we many of us arrive at the monastery not being able to speak Thai. And we're not familiar with Thai customs, and we find the physical environment can be quite challenging. But Lumpo Anan, the teacher at Wat Mapchan, has so much compassion that he'll ordain us anyway. And sometimes, actually reflecting on it in the years since, looking back on it, I thought it's actually kind of unreasonable that he would actually even ordain us. Even me, he'd ordain me. I entered the monastery with physical health problems that I told them about in advance. And as I said, I didn't speak the Thai language, and I found that I was totally unfamiliar with Thai culture and all of this. And but he was quite willing to ordain me and ordain all the other monks, the Western monks who went there. And the community of Thai monks and the lay supporters were always very happy and quite inspired to help out as well. And even when we did things that didn't really make sense or seemed quite off by cultural standards, or when we were trying to talk to people and they couldn't understand us and they found it so frustrating, having trying to help and support the Western monks, but they would always put on a smile and help us out because they felt like if they were to help out somebody who's sincere in the practice, then this is good for them and it's good for the religion. And they genuinely wanted to help us because of the feelings of metta that they had for other people. And so and I think the other foreign monks, I can't quite speak for them, but I know that they would agree, find that as long as we hang in there and we keep trying, people kind of rise up with the supports for the practice so that we can make it through, and we keep experiencing wonderful benefits from it, the delicious spiritual pleasures. So let's see. So yeah. One of the things about the list, maybe I'll go on to another aspect of this list of the 10 Pāramis, is that I mentioned before that it's not in the suttas, and in fact the word Pārami doesn't show up in the suttas. Another interesting aspect of it is, if I understand correctly, if you look into Mahayana traditions, they have not a list of 10, but a list of 6. And I have to admit, I'm not sure how they compare to the list of 10 that we have in the Theravadan school. And there are other qualities that very skillful qualities that don't seem to be on the list that we have in Theravada, the 10 that we have here. They show up in other lists in the suttas, for example, in the Bodhipakya Dhammas. Gave a talk this morning on the Bojjhangas, the factors of enlightenment, and the 5 faculties. And so, for example, if you look at the 5 faculties, we have faith as the initial one, a very skillful quality. If you look at one of the, and the questions have been raised about this kind of thing with the meditation masters. So what about something like faith or concentration, say samadhi? And one meditation master asked her, well, samadhi is it's not on the list of Pāramis, but it's like a Pārami. And I think we might get the same answer to a question about faith, because the masters emphasize, that it's good to have some faith, and it's good to be skeptical. It's good to have some faith. It's not necessary that you should believe everything, and in fact, you shouldn't just go ahead and believe everything, but you should try to have enough faith that if you hear a teaching, and if you contemplate it and it seems sensible, that you should give it a try. Give it a sincere try, and see if you get the kind of results that are promised. If you don't, then go back to the teacher and talk about what happened and see if something should be done differently. But you have to be willing to give things a try and test them out for yourselves and see if the faith is warranted. And so faith is a very good quality. And they say that the quality of faith, if it's well developed, founded on your own experience, that it then in turn can be very beneficial for you. You can actually open the heart, so that you can receive assistance. For example, the loving kindness of your teacher, which can be very sustaining in hard times, for example. And so it seems to me, in my experience, that even though we have a list of 10 in the Theravadan tradition, the 10 Pārami, that my own experience with the teachers is that they didn't teach so specifically about the Pārami, like the Pārami are just these 10, specifically these 10, and skillful qualities that aren't on the list are not Pārami. But rather they tended to talk in general about skillful qualities, and things like faith is very good, dana, that is generosity, is very good. The adhitthana parami, determination, is very good. If you can set your mind to doing something and stick with it, as long as it's skillful, usually for those of us who are new on the path with the consultation with the teacher, for example, and the guidance of a teacher, and this is very good. And we don't have to be concerned too much about whether or not a particular skillful quality is a parami, or something like this. It's more about the general attitude of trying to cultivate skillful qualities, and that the 10 parami can serve as a guide to examples of good qualities that we can cultivate. I look at the list of parami, these skillful qualities, as being some of the raw materials that we can use for our spiritual practice. Many of the qualities have names, at least some of them have names that correspond to factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. This is quite frequently referred to in Theravadan Buddhism. We have the Noble Eightfold Path comes to us in the Fourth Noble Truth, given to us by the Buddha. The Noble Eightfold Path is the path that leads to the end of suffering, which is promised to us in the Third Noble Truth. So, for example, we have sila, which shows up in the Noble Eightfold Path as right action, right speech, and right livelihood. We also have paññā on the list of paramis, or wisdom, which shows up as the paññā khandha of the Noble Eightfold Path, right view and right intention. I think my understanding of these parami is that, as I mentioned, is that these are kind of the raw materials for the spiritual path that we develop through our lives in the various circumstances we find ourselves in, and through some specific determined effort in our spiritual practices. That paññā, for example, is kind of a general ability to discern cause and effect relationships. And that if it's well enough honed, and if we guide it very specifically, then we can develop the qualities of samaditi, that is right view, and samma sankappa, that is right intention. So while paññā is the ability to discern cause and effect relationships, samaditi and samma sankappa are more specifically the cause and effect relationships related to the origination and cessation of suffering. And so while the sila parami, to my mind, is the kind of the general capability to have self-control, the right action, right speech, and right livelihood prescriptions in the Noble Eightfold Path are the aspects of self-control that are specifically necessary for attaining nibbana. So it's a more specific application of self-control that is guided directly by the Buddhist teachings, directly towards enlightenment, rather than self-control in general. Okay. And so the meditation masters of Thailand would say, if you're on the path of developing parami, say for example you have the aspiration to in the future become the chief disciple of a Buddha, for example, like the Venerable Sariputta or Mahamoggallana from our own Buddhist dispensation, or if you have the aspiration to be a Sammasambuddha, a rightly self-awakened one in the future, or a Pacceka Buddha, a silent Buddha in the future, or if you have the aspiration to try to develop parami to stay in the round of rebirths to help your friends, but to still attain enlightenment in this dispensation, you can develop these kinds of qualities in general. But you also can develop them through the development of the Noble Eightfold Path. If you have the aspiration to attain enlightenment, to go directly to attaining enlightenment, you don't have to be concerned about whether or not you have enough parami or not, because the development of the Noble Eightfold Path in and of itself is a generator of parami as well. And so if you get right to work on developing the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, you'll develop the spiritual qualities that you need to attain enlightenment. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a look and see if we have any questions from the group here at the monastery listening. I wonder if we have from the meditators, if we have any questions on the topic of Pārami. Yes, Samanera. Yes, Samaramitiku.
You spoke a little bit about this. Really, two questions. The first question I have: the relationship of Saddha, faith, and Kanti and patience. It seems like we can have Kanti if we have, as you spoke about, if we have faith in the path, we can have that endurance with difficult times.
Right.
And I wonder if you would speak about that. And then also it seems equanimity, Upeka has, as you spoke about, quite a relationship with Kanti as well.
Right. Yes, I think you're touching on the one hand on the kind of the interrelationship and kind of overlap between some of these qualities. If we have upekkha as a sense of equanimity, then that'll help us remain in kind of a balanced mind, even if we're experiencing, for example, the example I gave, a lack of resources in our life. That will help us to endure difficult situations. If we have faith, I think your point is very good. If we have faith that simply by enduring hard times, that we'll eventually get through them, because hard times in life eventually have to pass. They'll be impermanent. We can also, if we have faith that enduring hard times also in turn develops our own spiritual qualities, that if we endure, this develops our quality of endurance. This will help us. This will lift us up in difficult times, knowing that when we get through them, that we'll be better off for it. We'll actually be stronger people. Another kind of example is the determination Pārami. My teacher, Lampo Anand, was teaching us in the early days about if you make determinations to accomplish certain goals in your spiritual practice. So, for example, if you make a determination to observe the precepts and go into the monastery for every one prat, as you say in Thai, that's the Uposita day from the Pali language, the observance day. If you make the determination to go into the monastery and practice meditation and keep the precepts, and if you follow through with it, then it also relates to your honesty Pārami. That's the virtue of honesty. You develop honesty, and you keep your honesty strong, and you develop your honesty Pārami because you're keeping to your word, your determination to do this, and because it's actually determination to keep sila, that is the precepts, then you're developing your sila Pārami as well. And so sometimes I found monks. I can remember one example in particular. I was working on a rather mundane chore, cleaning a dwelling that one of the monks had just moved out of, and kind of an everyday occurrence in the monastery. And a more senior monk I was working with, he turned to me. He quite a smile on his face. He was very, very happy and buoyant, whereas I was feeling kind of bored and quite uninspired. But he turned to me. He was so happy. He started counting off the various Pārami that we were developing and doing this quite mundane task of cleaning a kuti, mopping floors and wiping down shelves and things like this. Says we're developing our energy Pārami because we're putting forth effort to do this. And I wonder if I can remember all of them. We're developing maybe endurance Pārami because it's so hot. It's the middle of the day, and it was maybe the hot season, and so it was quite sweaty work doing this kind of thing. And so he's listing out, we're developing our dana Pārami because this is kind of an act of generosity. If you think of it this way, if we put our hearts into it, that we're doing a service for the Sangha, then we're developing our dana Pārami as well. So it's kind of an inspiring little game to play, thinking of all the various Pārami we were developing, and say, oh yeah, you're right. Actually, this is good. So, yeah. I wonder if we have any more comments, questions. Yes, Ranka.
Thank you so much. It was a beautiful talk.
Oh, good.
When you describe this idea of the chitta being able to come from nibbana to samsara, it reminds me of something I read in Ajahn or Lumpur biography. When he attains Nibbana in the forest, he sees the Buddha and his disciples, and he's crying. And that image I always found to be very inspiring. Anyway, my question is, if one wanted to call upon, let's say like Ajahn Lee is someone who I feel a great honor and affinity towards, is there a practice or way to call upon these forces?
Ah, great question. Yeah, right. Okay. Yes. This is a topic. I want to be honest and straightforward about it. This is a topic that, to some degree, I take on faith from the meditation masters, and it's a topic that probably met with quite a bit of skepticism in modern America. And I know the topic was brought up recently in the monastery that perhaps Buddhism could be thought of as a science. And I mentioned, actually, in some ways it seems scientific, in some ways it seems like it's very psychological, for example, but also there are quite mystical aspects to Buddhism as well. And some of the things that I talked about in this talk sound quite fantastic, actually. But the meditation masters actually stand by this, and so I've developed some faith in it, and I think also the part of what gives me faith in it is that the quite straightforward dhammas that the masters have given us, that we find also for example, in the Pali scriptures about relying on our own effort and the diligence we have to put into the meditation practice, kind of the bread and butter of spiritual practice, Then also they do hold that it is possible to be helped by bodhisattvas and enlightened beings who can come to us at difficult times in our practice. And some of the meditation masters actually gave their disciples what they call entaya, gatha, coming from the Pali. I can't remember if it's exactly the same word, gatha, meaning a verse that they could recite at a time when they wanted to invite or request help from them. Remember, for example, Reverend Grandfather Kao, Analayo. I remember seeing a gatha from him that he gave to his disciples in a book. Apparently there's a gatha for Reverend Grandfather Mun that he gave his disciples. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Temple Lee Tamadaro gave a gatha to his disciples, but I can't say, and it might be something to ask his disciples about. But there's also another teaching, which is that actually the gatha is a way to kind of focus the mind on requesting help from a spiritual being, from a spiritual friend. And so actually what's most needed is a sense of faith and sincerity, to sincerely request and have faith to open up the heart to receive help from the master. I remember one monk telling me a story about how to his mind, he was helped by a bodhisattva. And it was quite a nice story, but he told the story about how he was helped by a bodhisattva and the legendary Somdet Do, whom I mentioned towards the beginning of the talk. And in talking about it back and forth, I mentioned to him that I heard that there was a gatha for Somdet Do. And he says, I think there probably is, but my gatha was Somdet Do, help. So he yelled out in a moment of panic. He was having a really hard time. He yelled out, Somdet Do, chway dway, which means Somdet Do, help. And according to the story he told, he received assistance immediately. It was quite a nice story. So perhaps you can find that could be your gatha if you ever have a hard time. My own teacher, Lumpur Nun, has counseled large groups of meditators that every morning when we wake up, we should request that the Buddha and the Kruba Ajahns, that's the masters, request that the bodhisattvas and all the noble ones to please help us to assert our mindfulness and be mindful throughout the day. And that this will be of benefit to us in our practice. All right, let's see here. Someone wrote in, you've already answered my question. That's great. Okay, good. had a very nice story this morning about someone wrote in that during the talk about the Bojangas this morning, they're having a hard time. They're feeling quite anxious, but during the talk they started practicing meditation, some loving kindness meditation, and they were able to overcome their anxiety right then and there on the spot. I thought it was quite a nice story. Okay. Someone asked about, are the Pāramis just another way of looking at the Eightfold Path? And right. So I talked about this a little bit, and it is a little bit complicated, but I think that maybe to mention again, to clarify it, because it can be a little bit complicated. I think of the Pārami as being the kind of the general raw materials that we use for doing something like developing the Noble Eightfold Path. So, for example, if we look at the path of the Bodhisattva who became the Gautama Buddha, he developed over many eons the Pārami that he needed to attain enlightenment on that night under the Bodhi tree. And because he had over time developed so much Pañña Pārami, I believe that this was the basis for when he did establish his religion and taught his disciples, he was able to teach them a very wide range of dhammas. So he was able to teach them the Noble Eightfold Path, but he was also able to teach them about many other kinds of cause and effect relationships, such as the benefits of giving and the benefits of keeping good morality, about skillful ways to rule a country if you're a king, for example. The kinds of qualities that you need to be successful as a business owner, and the kinds of the way to be a good spouse. So wisdom in regard to cause and effect relationships in a variety of different kinds of situations. According to my understanding, this comes from the development of the Pañña Pārami. Then if we look at the Noble Eightfold Path, we have a very specific kind of application of the Pañña Pārami as Samma Ditti and Samma Sankappa, that is right view and right intention. If we look at Sila being self-control, as the Sila Pārami being self-control in general, then we see specific applications of that in the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay. If we look at, for example, the Pārami of energy or effort, virya, so that it has a specific application as right effort in the Noble Eightfold Path. So some people, for example, will do things to develop their virya Pārami specifically. And it may not actually be something that would really be on the Noble Eightfold Path. I think I've heard of at least one person who undertook long bike rides. He really liked to ride bikes, and he thought of ride his bicycle, and he was an avid cyclist, and he thought that riding long distances and developing his endurance in this way was a development of Pārami. So this general attribute of energy and endurance and so on, which is actually two different Pāramis according to the list. But then if we look at the Noble Eightfold Path, it's a specific application, the exerting the effort to allay unskillful mental states and to cultivate skillful mental states. There you go. So then maybe that's kind of clarifying about the relationship and the difference between the Pārami and the Noble Eightfold Path. There's a story from Wat Mapchan in regard to one of the ascetic practices. This is relatively common in the Thai forest tradition, the practice of Nisit Jig, coming from the Pali. It's actually in it finds its footing in the Pali Suttas with the one luminous night, or the one glorious night of staying up all night practicing meditation, and it's in the standard list of ascetic practices we find in the commentaries as well, the list of 13 ascetic practices. And so in the Ajahn Chah tradition, it was standard at Wat Nong Papong, Ajahn Chah's monastery, that every lunar observance night, so about once a week, the community would stay up all night practicing meditation. They wouldn't lie down. That's the meaning of Nesajig, not lying down. And so they would use this opportunity of not lying down to practice meditation. Say Ajahn Chah he really thought this was an excellent practice. In the early days, he would actually lock the doors to the hall, so that nobody could get out the sala on the observance night, so they had to stay in and practice meditation. And some of the meditation masters still do things kind of like this. I heard a story about I think it was Lumpu Ban's monastery. He was a disciple of I forget who he was a disciple of, but he was one of the more senior disciples of in the Lumpu Mon lineage, and he tells disciples on the observance nights during a rainy season a few years ago that they had to sit in meditation in the sitting posture in the same spot all night. So they would sit from about 9 or 10 o'clock at night until about 3 or 4 in the morning, just sitting in that posture. And it could quite a hard thing to do, I think. I have some experience practicing the all-night sits and practicing sitting meditation and walking meditation could be quite a savior. Some nights when you're feeling very sleepy, you can get up and practice walking meditation. But Lumpu Ben wanted them to really have to exert a lot of effort internally. So he'd say, you can't even get up and practice walking meditation. And so it shows I think telling a story like that shows the amount of value the masters place on putting effort into the practice to cultivate skillful qualities quickly. One night, several years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago at Wat Mapchan, Lumpur Anand told the community after evening worship on one observance night, he said, I want you, as many of you as possible, to stay up all night meditating, practice the Nesajig. And he turned to one of the more senior, one of his disciples, a very senior monk at the monastery, and he said, Ajahn, I'd like you to lead. And so then he rang the bell, and we started the evening of Nesajig practice. And this very senior Ajahn, he turned around on a sitting cushion, and he put himself in meditation posture. This was about 9 o'clock or 9:30 at night, and he sat there motionless until about 3 in the morning. It was quite noticeable, as everybody else from time to time would get up and go practice walking meditation, for example, or go out onto the porch and get a drink of coffee, which was also many of us found very helpful on these nights of all-night meditation. But this very senior Ajahn, he sat there motionless for several hours, and then when the typical practice time for this was over, he simply stood up and he rose up from meditation, I should say, and led us in the closing homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And we went down the hill for morning worship, the usual morning worship hall. So quite an inspiring example of how far we can take our meditation practice if we keep working at it over the years. And then some years later, one of the foreign monks undertook the practice of doing Nesajig for many nights in a row. I think as I recall, he made a determination that he would do not lying down for 7 or 8 days or something like this. But then when this time was up, he continued it, and other monks started to glom onto this, and they started staying up with him, and so that the group grew from him to 2 monks to 4 monks to 6 monks to 8 monks. And Lumpur Anand, he saw this happening, and he started talking more and more about the benefits of doing Nesajig practice. So, this is really good practice. You can develop a lot of skillful qualities this way very quickly. And then more and more monks started doing it. The group rose to 12 monks, to 14 monks, to 16 monks. And then Lumpur Anand really started trying to really encouraging and really starting to whip up, you could say, some enthusiasm for this, talking about it more and more frequently, and saying what a great practice this was, and how many benefits came from this, until probably about 30 to 35 monks or so. It was a community of about 50 monks. Undertook the practice of long-term Nesajig, so that they were doing Nesajig. Some of them did it for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Lying down, Lumpur gave them an allowance. He said, if you do want to take a rest, you can go to sleep, but not lie down. Actually, I misspoke. Not lie down. You can sleep sitting up. So, for example, you could take a nap at some point during the day, in the middle of the day, but while sitting up. And so some monks take advantage of this, and they were able to continue. Take advantage of it. They used the allowance because they found it very beneficial for their practice. They could continue doing the Nesajig practice for several months. And Lumpur Anand, he recorded messages for them that would play over the loudspeakers at night, with stories of his own eccentric practice when he was a younger monk, and of the benefits that other meditation masters found from the practice of eccentric. And so one thing I noticed about this was interesting was that at one point in this process, many of the monks had gotten, as we might expect, had gotten very tired. Some of them had found it quite refreshing to practice the Neksijig, because if you practice a meditation all night and you don't give the kilesas a chance to really take hold and to cloud over the mind, then the mind actually begins to feel quite light. The kilesas, greed, aversion, and delusion, are heavy and they're burdensome and they're suffering. And they have a tendency to tell us to do a lot of things. They kind of jerk us around and push us around. But if we practice meditation continuously and we keep those at bay and we keep them from arising, then the heart becomes light and the heart becomes quite radiant. You see some of these monks, their faces, even though they hadn't slept, some of them in 2 or 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and were practicing meditation, they looked quite fresh and radiant. And they actually would say this: I feel so refreshed. As the practice continued, though, some of them also found they were getting really exhausted, which you can't blame them for. And some of them, it got to a point, where Luang Por Nun would ring the bell to continue the meditation after the chanting ended at evening worship. And we see the rows of monks, 20, 30 monks, and they start nodding off. They would be kind of even bobbing, kind of. And I remember thinking to myself, this is quite a curious thing. I was thinking to myself, Luang Por is really encouraging this practice, and he's telling him to keep doing it. But it looks kind of odd. I mean, all these monks, they're kind of nodding off, and they're pulling themselves back up again. And they nod off, and they kind of bend over. And then they pull themselves back up again. And it was, in a way, it was quite inspiring to see how much effort they were putting forth, really trying to keep up with this practice that their teacher was commending to them. And apparently Luang Por Nun had heard some comments from some people, I think some lay people, about this, like, does this really have benefit? And the example of a monk who can sit down at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and sit continuously until 3 in the morning, meditating, is quite inspiring. But is this really good? What's happening with these monks? They're so tired now, so exhausted. And Luang Por Nun said, no, this is good. You don't have to look at this as being something that isn't good. This is good, because these monks are really developing a lot of energy Pārami and a lot of endurance Pārami. And this is exactly what will serve as a support for them, so that in the future, they too will be able to do that kind of meditation where they can sit down and go into samadhi and stay in samadhi for several hours at a time. And so when I think about difficulties that I'm having in the practice, for example, meditation, if I'm feeling very sleepy, or if I feel like I'm not able to focus the mind, and I wonder if is this really going anywhere? Am I really getting anything out of this? Am I really gonna get somewhere with this? And I remember that, and I think, my teacher says that this will develop these qualities, and I think I have felt some of this benefit myself over time, in that at least my mind seems stronger. But I think anyone can find this out for themselves. If you keep practicing and keep trying, if you endure and exert effort, that actually over time you do feel stronger inside, and then it becomes easier to put the mind onto, for example, your meditation object, or to have the willpower to do work that you need to do, even when you might have felt like you're out of energy already. You'd have the energy and the inspiration to keep giving, even when you were worried about making a sacrifice, for example. And so I'd like to invite you and encourage you, if I may, to try to endure and develop these kinds of spiritual qualities. And you may find that in the future, in a time of need, that they're there for you as supports that will help you in what you're trying to do. All right, so we've been going for a while now, and I hope you found the talk to be of interest and inspiring, hopefully to some degree. And so I'd like to probably close with this, leave you with these thoughts. And yes, I invite you. I invite you.
Anandamayam Dhammakataya Sadhukaram Nadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
So best wishes to you all. May you all be happy. May you all prosper in the Dhamma. For this session, we're coming to a close. Until next time, may you be well.